So I want you to think, just for a second, about a mistake you've made at work.
Oh, man, we've all been there.
Right. Like a really embarrassing, just a split-second lapse in judgment. Maybe you hit reply all on a super sensitive email,
Hmm.
or you spilled a massive cup of coffee all over a client's presentation.
The worst feeling, just that instant dread.
Exactly. You feel your stomach drop, the panic completely sets in, you apologize, you clean it up, and, well, eventually life just moves on.
Right. Yeah, people forget.
Nobody mentions it anymore. But now, I want you to imagine that you spent the next 40 years achieving absolute world-changing greatness in your field.
Okay.
But that one tiny embarrassing mistake,
Yeah.
that becomes the very first line of your obituary.
Wow. Yeah, it's a terrifying concept, honestly. It's the ultimate loss of control over your own life's narrative.
Yeah.
You spend decades building this massive cathedral, and the world just decides to only look at, like, a single broken stained glass window in the basement.
That's a perfect way to put it. Imagine building that legacy. Decades of sold-out stadium tours, multi-platinum records, literally defining the entire genre of heavy metal, only for the world to obsess over the flavor profile of a flying mammal.
It is wild when you frame it like that.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core irony here is just staggering. We are talking about the late Ozzy Osbourne.
A true legend.
Right, a musical titan who achieved massive global success. Yet, the single most infamous moment of his career, the thing that permanently hijacked his legacy, it all boils down to a fraction of a second in 1982, where he mistook a real bat for a rubber toy.
And, the sheer scale of the legacy that this incident managed to overshadow, that's what makes this a fascinating study in contrast. When he passed away recently, in 2025, he left behind a cultural footprint that is almost impossible to quantify.
Totally.
We aren't just talking about a popular musician here. We are talking about a double induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. First in 1984 with Black Sabbath, and then again in 2024 as a solo artist.
Which is insane.
It really is. That is a very rarefied tier of musical prestige.
And the catalog. I mean, we all know the foundational text of heavy metal.
Yeah.
Crazy Train, War Pigs, No More Tears, Paranoid.
All absolute classics.
Yeah. But it went so far beyond the music, too. He was a multi-generational cultural force. Like, think about the Osbournes in the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah, that completely changed TV.
He essentially pioneered the modern celebrity reality television format. He spent half a century painstakingly building this incredible, diverse body of work.
Right.
It's like spending 50 years painting the Sistine Chapel, but the only thing anyone ever asks you about is the one time you accidentally drank your paint water.
Yeah, and worse, the public then demands you drink the paint water at every gallery showing for the next 40 years.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of public memory, specifically how our brains are wired to process information. Human beings have what's called an evolutionary novelty bias.
A novelty bias.
Yeah, we are hardwired to filter out predictable, consistent patterns, like a musician reliably releasing great albums for decades, and we instantly flag severe anomalies as vital, unforgettable information.
Huh. So because the music is consistent, we ignore it.
Well, the brain categorizes the grotesque or the bizarre as something that disrupts our normal understanding of the world. So he earned the moniker Prince of Darkness through his heavy, groundbreaking music, right?
Oh.
But that title was truly immortalized in the public consciousness by this complete freak accident because it just totally hijacked that novelty bias.
I get that, but I want to push back on the idea that this was just a totally random stroke of bad luck, like a completely freak accident.
Casso?
Because a normal person walking down the street doesn't just pick up a random object from the ground and put it in their mouth.
Fair point.
To understand the mechanics of why Ozzy did it, we have to look at the psychological baseline he had already set for himself. We have to rewind just 1 year prior to the bad incident, back to 1981.
Ah, yes. The 1981 environment is the crucial missing context here, because this wasn't a raucous, sweat-soaked concert venue.
No, not at all.
This was a CBS sales convention in the United States, a highly sanitized, totally corporate setting. He was just there to promote his Blizzard of Oz album to industry executives.
Right, so picture the sheer friction of that environment. You have a bunch of music executives in, tailored suits, sitting in a brightly lit, carpeted boardroom at a sales convention.
Right.
And in walks a heavy metal frontman. And what does he do to make an impression? He bites the heads off 2 doves.
It's unbelievable. Doves, which were allegedly already dead before he entered the room, but still.
Even so.
Yeah, the visual impact, the sheer visceral shock value to a room full of corporate suits, it was undeniable. It was a calculated act of rebellion masquerading as madness.
But see, this is my point. If you've already established yourself as the guy who brings dead doves to a corporate meeting and bites their heads off in front of executives to get a reaction, haven't you fundamentally blurred your own boundary?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you can't really claim a bat on stage as an out-of-nowhere anomaly when you've already shown yourself and your fans that extreme grotesque behavior with animals is just part of the Ozzy Osbourne promotional toolkit.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we're looking at the rapid, really dangerous escalation of rock star antics and the feedback loop it creates.
The feedback loop.
Yeah, in the world of rock and roll, there is this constant, intense pressure to push the envelope. The Dove incident functioned as a psychological primer. First, it primed the audience. It sent a clear signal to the fans, like, expect the extreme, expect the unhinged.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And critically, it primed the artist himself. Once you cross a line that extreme in a corporate meeting, your internal threshold for what constitutes outrageous behavior, well, it permanently shifts.
Right, biting the head off a bird just becomes another day at the office.
Exactly. The baseline for normal is destroyed.
The baseline is gone. The boundary between a theatrical stage performance and visceral reality is completely blurred. And the audience is now just like craving the next hit of shock value.
They're expecting it.
Which means the stage is literally and figuratively set for a disaster. The environment is basically a ticking time bomb. And this brings us to January 1982. Des Moines, Iowa.
This is where the anatomy of the myth really crystallizes. It's a standard tour stop, but the environment of a heavy metal concert in the early 80s was just absolute chaos.
Complete pandemonium.
It was deafeningly loud, aggressive, unpredictable. Fans tossing strange, often dangerous objects onto the stage wasn't just a possibility, it was standard practice.
Yeah.
Artists were entirely used to navigating a stage littered with random debris thrown from the darkness of the crowd.
And out in that chaotic darkness is a fan named Mark Neal. Now, Neal had planned all along to throw a bat up to the band. He even assured everyone around him that the bat had been, quote, dead for days.
Right, which is a wild thing to assure people of.
Seriously. So in the middle of the set, this bat sails through the air and lands on the stage.
And out of all the places it could have landed on that massive stage, it happens to drop right in front of the bass player, Rudy Sarzo.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you break down the localized breakdown of reality here, it is a perfect storm of completely mundane split-second actions.
Yes.
It's a chain reaction of sheer bad luck fueled by the environment. You have a fan who throws something. You have a bass player who sees it, assumes it's a prop, and physically motions for the singer to pick it up.
Right.
And you have a singer who is completely hopped up on adrenaline, blinded by massive stage spotlights, dealing with, like, 110 decibels of noise. He looks down and assumes it's a rubber Halloween toy.
It's the ultimate failure of context. Rudy Sarzo just sees a theatrical prop in a theatrical setting.
Right. Makes total sense to him.
And the singer sees what he thinks is a plastic toy. And because his psychological baseline was already shifted by the Dove incident, his immediate thought isn't caution. His thought is, I'll give the crowd the show they expect. He picks it up. And no one in that packed venue could have possibly predicted the outcome of those three simple split-second actions, because every single person was operating on a completely different assumption of reality.
But the assumption that it's a harmless piece of rubber is shattered instantly. Violently.
Yeah.
The very second his teeth close down.
Oh, it's so visceral.
I really want to linger on the sheer sensory horror of this moment. Because the realization that he has made a catastrophic mistake hits him from two directions simultaneously.
Yeah.
First, visually, from the side of the stage. His wife and manager Sharon is standing in the wings, and she frantically, urgently signals to him that the bat is real. He is literally unable to comprehend what he had just done.
The visual of his manager trying to communicate the gravity of the situation over the roar of a heavy metal crowd while he stands center stage, it's incredibly cinematic.
It really is.
But the physical realization is far more visceral and immediate than anything happening in the wings.
Yeah, we have to look at his exact words to understand the physiological shock here. In his 2010 autobiography, I Am Ozzy, he describes the immediate physical sensation, and it is incredibly graphic.
Oh, boy.
He wrote, "Immediately, though, something felt wrong, very wrong. For a start, my mouth was instantly full of this warm, gloopy liquid.
The sensory clash there is just staggering. Your brain is entirely prepped for the resistance of dry, rigid rubber or plastic. You expect a hollow crunch,
Yeah, holocrunch.
and instead you get a rush of warm biological fluid. It is an instant violent collision between stage theatrics and biological reality.
And it gets infinitely worse. He continues the quote, "Then the head in my mouth twitched."
Oh, God.
Now, there is debate on this. Accounts differ on whether the bat was actually alive at that point, especially since the fan who threw it claimed it had been dead for days.
Right, there's always been that debate.
But the perception, the feeling of it twitching against his tongue, imagine that immediate sickening shift in reality. 1 second you're the rock god, commanding thousands of screaming fans feeling utterly invincible in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah.
And the literal next second, your mouth is full of warm, gloopy liquid, something twitches, and the invincible facade instantly evaporates.
And, he didn't shy away from the sensory details later in life either. When people would inevitably interrogate him about it, he revealed the most mundane yet disturbing detail of all. He noted the taste.
Oh no, what did he say?
He said, "The taste of bats is very salty. They taste of salt."
Just, the absolute shock of it all. When you strip away the heavy metal aesthetics, it's not a dark, mysterious, occult ritual. It's just a gross, salty, incredibly dangerous biological mistake.
Which perfectly sets up the profound irony of the medical aftermath. The Prince of Darkness performs what looks to the audience in the cheap seats like a demonic, ultimate rock star act of defiance. But the immediate, unglamorous result isn't a summoning of dark forces. It's a panicked, terrifying rush to the local hospital.
Because bats are notorious carriers of disease, specifically rabies.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the rock star is rushed to the hospital and subjected to a series of incredibly painful rabies shots.
Yeah.
And you have to remember the context of the early 1980s. Rabies protocols weren't just a simple jab in the arm back then. They often involved a grueling series of large needle injections directly into the abdomen.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It was. The incident completely rips away the heavy metal mythology. It replaces the leather and studs and the smoke machines with a very cold, harsh, sterile medical reality.
No.
In that clinic, you aren't a demon lord. You are a vulnerable human being who has been exposed to a fatal neurological virus and now needs urgent, painful medical intervention just to survive.
The physical pain of those abdominal rabies shots eventually faded. He survived. But the cultural hangover, that became a permanent, inescapable fixture in his life.
It really did.
The aftermath of that night in Des Moines fundamentally altered how the world interacted with him.
It became the heavy anchor of his public persona. After the incident, he literally couldn't go anywhere without being asked about the bat.
Never.
It became the defining filter through which the entire global public viewed him, completely superseding the music he was actually there to promote.
And it deeply distorted reality. People began assuming he routinely bit the heads off of other animals.
Like it was a hobby.
Yeah. Like it was just his daily dietary habit or, a mandatory contractual part of every single concert. The narrative completely spiraled out of his control. He became a caricature of his own mistake.
He tried to manage it with humor. He would joke about it publicly on talk shows, which, is a very common psychological defense mechanism when you are constantly bombarded with the exact same narrative.
Yeah, you just own it.
Exactly. You lean into the skid to try and regain some semblance of control. But the truth was much darker for him personally. He actively hated it.
I can imagine.
He deeply resented being asked about it repeatedly. It was a source of immense, exhausting frustration.
So what does this all mean? If we step back and look at the emotional toll of this, it is frankly exhausting to even think about.
It is.
Imagine having a single panicked, mistaken assumption, thinking a real animal was a rubber Halloween toy, become the only thing millions of people want to talk to you about for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
Every interview, every fan interaction on the street, every press junket, always aggressively circling back to the salty taste of a mistake.
This raises an important question about the fundamental nature of celebrity and the economy of attention. Who actually owns an artist's legacy?
That's a good question.
Is it the artists themselves, earned through their decades of relentless hard work, their musical innovation, their massive chart-topping hits? Or is the legacy ultimately owned by the public, who collectively decide to obsess over the most outrageous, tabloid-ready mistake, entirely ignoring the underlying artistic achievements?
It's the public, isn't it? I mean, we act like we own them. We demand the hits. We buy the tickets. But we quietly, or sometimes very loudly, prefer the train wrecks.
We really do.
We want the myth more than we want the music, because the myth is easier.
The myth requires zero effort to consume. It's a sensational, frictionless soundbite. Listening to Crazy Train and really appreciating the complex guitar work takes time and musical context.
Right.
Biting the head off a bat is a shocking, instant, easily digestible story that you can immediately recount at a dinner party. It requires absolutely no musical knowledge to find it fascinating. The public's attention economy heavily favors the grotesque over the great.
So to recap this wild journey we've been on in this deep dive, we started with a monumental musical career that spanned half a century and reshaped an entire genre.
Yep.
We saw how a dangerous psychological precedent was set in a sterile corporate boardroom with two doves, completely destroying the baseline for normal behavior.
The dominoes started falling.
They did. We tracked the incredibly unlucky perfect storm of a chain reaction in Iowa, a fan's throw, a bassist's point, a mistaken rubber toy under blinding lights.
Such bad luck.
And we felt the visceral, sensory horror of a mouthful of warm, salty liquid, leading to painful abdominal rabies shots and a lifetime of unwanted, repetitive questions.
A single localized breakdown of reality that permanently cemented a title, The Prince of Darkness, while simultaneously tormenting the very human man trapped behind the moniker.
It really makes you think about how we, as a culture, consume the people we claim to admire. Do you define the icons in your life by their greatest, most enduring achievements? Or do you secretly prefer the bizarre accidents, the spectacular missteps, and the things that go horribly wrong?
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the mechanics of how this myth actually spread. In 1982, this incident was shocking, but it functioned as a slow-building, word-of-mouth legend.
Right, pre-internet.
Exactly. It was passed around in schoolyards, debated in record stores, and eventually mythologized over years, largely defining Ozzy's career in a bizarrely iconic way. But imagine the exact same scenario today.
Oh, man.
Imagine if a rock star made a similar grotesque biological mistake on stage tonight. We live in an era where every single angle of a stage is live-streamed, where tens of thousands of fans are recording in 4K on their phones, and the high-definition footage is uploaded instantly to a global audience.
It'll be everywhere in seconds.
Would that level of immediate high-definition multi-angle scrutiny build a mythical rock and roll legacy like it did in 1982? Or would the sheer graphic reality of it just result in an instant wave of visceral disgust and an unrecoverable cancellation of their entire career?
It's a completely different cultural landscape now. The myth-making machine just doesn't work the same way when everything is captured in unblinking, high-definition reality. Mystery is gone.
It really is.
So the next time you find yourself dwelling on that embarrassing mistake you made at work, just be grateful it wasn't caught on a 4K camera from 50 different angles.
Amen to that.
And be incredibly grateful that cleaning up your mistake didn't involve an emergency trip to the hospital for abdominal rabies shots.